Morning. We're on Tezayin Amud Aleph. We are on the bottom of 16a. Where we're at right now is trying to find out if ashes can be used instead of the earth in the Sotah waters. And the way we came at this was by acknowledging that this would be an expansion of the meaning of the verse itself. The verse uses the word afar, which means earth, and we would expand that to also mean ashes. So what we did was, we found the Mishnaic text, we as in the sages of the Gemara, found the Mishnaic text, which lists 3 times the Torah expands the meaning of the words. And we tried to conclude that from the fact that this Mishnah, authored by Rabbi Yishmael, lists 3 and no more, the implication is that there are no other times in which the meaning of the verse is expanded. If that's the case, then ashes cannot be used. But the Gemara then went on to say yesterday that the list does not seem to be exhaustive. It doesn't seem as if there's 3 times when the words of the Torah are to be expanded, and that's it. Now we know this because there's another time when the meaning of the verse is expanded. Specifically, with respect to shaving the one who's a Mitzvah, as we noted yesterday, depending on the circumstances, the person might have to go through a shaving twice. The first time he goes through a shaving, it's complete his entire body. The second time, however, the plain meaning of the verse, through extrapolation of the system of klal, pratu klal, when the verse has a general statement and then a specific statement and a general statement, the way we do, how we reconcile that is by taking the specifics and finding the common denominator and thus expanding the meaning, right? So using that principle, the literal meaning of the verse would be to shave the head, eyebrows, beard, and pubic hair. The verse itself says head, eyebrows, and beard. The commonality between all these 3 is that they're all a place in which hair grows in a cluster and it's exposed. There's nothing, no body part covering it. And therefore, when this specific statement, hair, beard, and eyebrows, is stated together with a general statement that says, shave him, then we expand the specific to anything else that shares a commonality, specifically pubic hair, which is an area which hair grows in a cluster and it's exposed. Barring any clothing, it's not covered by the body itself, as opposed to the armpits, which is also cluster hair, but covered by the body, as opposed to hairs on the legs and the arms, which are exposed, but don't grow in a cluster in that sense. Okay, so had we taken the literal meaning of the verse, then we would stick with only shaving head, beard, eyebrows, and pubic hair. But we expand it to say the same way the person shaves the first time. It's got to be the entire body. The expression in the Gemara is like a squash, completely shaven. So the second time also has got to be completely shaven. So we've expanded the meaning of the verse. And therefore, the original list, which told us 3 times that we expand the meaning of the verse, is not exhaustive. There are other things that are not on the list. Now, if there are other things that are not on the list, then maybe as well the ashes in replacement of the earth at the Sotah is also not on the list, but really it's something that might be a possibility. Clear? That's where we are right now. It's a bit of a twist, but this is the gist of it. I hope we're clear on this. Okay, we're going to dig a little deeper here. So we got to screw on our thinking caps now. Okay, so the first thing the Gemara does is like this. The Gemara,
So
yeah.
So that when you said shave the second time and you shave the first time, is that an additional reason why it's not exhaustive?
That is the reason why it's not exhaustive, because we've taken the Mitzvah law out of its literal meaning of the verse and expanded it.
I thought the limited general, or was it limited general limited?
That is the literal way of reading the verse. The literal way of reading the verse is
that was using, but I thought that was the arm.
That is.
I thought that was one of the reasons of why it's not expansive. That
No.
example.
Okay, so the general
Then
and
the
limited.
other one where the second has to be like the first was example number two.
No, it's one example.
It's one example.
Yes, because, okay, make that clear. That's a good point. So at this point, the Gemara is assuming at this point that when you have a general rule and the particular and the general, which led us to understand that it's not just the head, eyebrows, and beard, as explicitly stated in the verse, but also the pubic hair, that is the literal interpretation of the verse. The literal interpretation of the verse is to follow the principle of general, particular, and general.
Mhm.
So the literal meaning of the verse incorporates within it this extrapolation of general, specific, and general. And then we've expanded that by saying the entire body. So it's really one example.
It's
Feeling?
expanded even more to say the
That's
entire
correct.
body.
The original expansion to go from head, hair, eyebrows to include pubic hair also is not an expansion of the literal meaning of the verse. That is the proper way to interpret the verse on its literal level, because we're using the rules of interpretation, which is the general, particular, and general.
That was the literal.
That's literal. The expansion is to do the entire body. Following?
Yeah.
This is actually a very important point. Thank you for bringing that up, because it's going to become necessary later as we change the extrapolative.
Yeah, because I was under the impression there's two examples.
No, it's one example. It's one example. The literal interpretation is to include the 13 principles that we described. That's incorporated within the literal meaning, which would include the pubic hair. Even though it's not stated explicitly, that's still the explicit meaning of the verse, following the principle of general, particular, general. And then we expanded that to say even the rest of the body, which is not included even by the interpretive rules. It's an expansion of the meaning. That's correct. Okay. So before the Gemara gets back to this point, which we will in a moment, just in case you're not confused yet, the first thing the Gemara is going to do is the Gemara is going to suggest two different ways of understanding the original list of 3 to be exhaustive. Now, as for the fact that we have the example of the Sotah, in which we do expand the meaning of the verse, the literal meaning after the interpretation, after the rules of interpretation, is head, eyebrows, beard, and pubic, and then we've gone to the entire body. But nonetheless, that doesn't disqualify the original list of 3 to be from being exhaustive. So let's see how that is. So 2 different ways of doing that. Says the Gemara this. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines from the bottom of the page, second word, Tezayin Amud Aleph 16a. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Rav Nachman, son of Yitzchak, says, Kika Chashiv, when Rabbi Yishmael lists 3 items where halacha a keves, that the tradition uproots or changes, expands the meaning of the verse, this is mikra, when he's expanding the meaning of the actual text. But over here with respect to the Sotah, a keves midrabanan. What this expansive understanding is not an expansion of the text, it's an expansion of the extrapolative system from the text.
So he's saying there's a difference.
So the difference. So the original list is exhaustive, because this is the entire list of times in which the tradition uproots the direct text. As for the Sotah, where we go from 4 items, head, beard, and eyebrows, and pubic hair, and we expand that to mean the entire body, that's not to uproot the literal text, that's to uproot the text as interpreted by the rules of interpretation. And thus it's not really common with the original list of Rabbi Yishmael. And therefore the list of Rabbi Yishmael could indeed be exhaustive. And if it's indeed exhaustive, then you can't use ashes. Now, as for the fact that there's another place in which we expand the meaning, over there we're not expanding the meaning of the text, we're expanding the meaning of the text as interpreted by the sages through the system of 13 principles. Clear? So that's one way of maintaining that Yishmael's list is exhaustive, even though we have the issue of the Sotah. And we make the distinction by saying the list of Rabbi Yishmael is expanding the literal the text, whereas this Sotah is to expand the meaning of the text, but expand the meaning of the text after it's already been extrapolated by the sages through the 13 principles. Clear?
The sage who came up with the 3 examples is the same.
Rabbi Yishmael.
Same sage who put together these extrapolated.
No. Oh, it's the same Rabbi Yishmael, yes. That's going to become necessary in a moment. Okay, that's going to become interesting. But either way, even if it's Rabbi Shmuel speaking about the 13 principles, and it's also Rabbi Shmuel making the exhaustive list, they're different. Here's a list of ways of talking, which talks to the Sotah, and here's a list of times when the actual text is expanded, as opposed to the text post-interpretation expansion. Okay. So this is one way of maintaining that the original list is exhaustive, notwithstanding the fact that the Sotah is also an expanded interpretation, but that's expansion post-interpretation of the 13 principles. Okay. Papa says, here's another way of maintaining that the original list is exhaustive. Kika Chashiv, when Rabbi Shmuel listed, third to last line, Halacha Keves, when Rabbi Shmuel said that there are 3 times in which the tradition changes or expands the meaning of the verse, this is only when Va'ikeres, when the expanded meaning actually uproots the original meaning. So again, you have 3 examples were covering blood, the Nazir, right, covering the blood. The verse says earth, and we've completely uprooted that meaning to say anything that causes things to grow. We've uprooted the original meaning. The second one is the Nazir, it says the Nazir cannot shave with a razor. We've uprooted that meaning and say you can't shave with anything. And the third example was divorce. Torah says a book. We've uprooted the meaning to say anything as long as you can transport it.
Right.
Whereas when it comes to the Sotah, the original meaning is to shave head, beard, eyebrows, and pubic hair. We didn't uproot the meaning. You're still shaving that. You're just shaving more. And therefore, over here, we're indeed expanding the meaning of the verse, but in expanding the meaning of the verse, we're not uprooting the original meaning. So when Rabbi Shmuel said a list of times in which the tradition expands the meaning of the verse, he means an exhaustive list of times when we do that and change and uproot the original meaning. If that's the case, then you cannot use the ashes for the Sotah, because the ashes of the Sotah would be to uproot the original meaning. The original meaning is dust, and we're saying, no, it's not dust. It's also ashes. Whereas when it comes to the Sotah, the original meaning of the verse, which is to shave, still maintains. We're just shaving more. We're not uprooting the original meaning of the verse. So these are 2 ways in which to maintain that Rabbi Shmuel's list of 3 is exhaustive.
Ashes is not uprooting the earth. It's not.
It doesn't uproot the earth, but it uproots the meaning of the verse. When the verse says the word earth, we're saying cancel that. It means other things too.
But if it's uprooting, then it's
not uprooting the law. It's uprooting the meaning of the verse. Uprooting the original meaning of the verse. Right? When we say shave, we're just telling you to shave more. The original shaving hasn't been changed. We're just adding to the shaving. So the original meaning of the text still is maintained. We just say do more. Right? But when we say you may not shave with a razor, and then we say, oh, cancel the word razor, don't shave, period. It's not simply that you're not shaving with a razor and we're expanding other requirements. We're actually changing what the verse meant, as opposed to expanding requirements. Right? So whereas when it comes, same thing would be with if we took earth, if we used ashes instead of earth. The original text says earth. And we've said, no, that doesn't mean actually earth, it means other things too.
I think that product Nair wasn't in existence.
Sorry?
There's a product called Nair.
What's that?
It's a lotion when you put on their legs. It just strips off the hair.
So that would probably be forbidden for us for a Nazir too, because we expanded to meaning to do any action to remove hair, however you do it, doesn't matter. So it's not just expanding the meaning.
Similar to the fray, which if it were, then it should have been included in the fray.
Correct. The ashes and the earth, that's right. Using ashes instead of earth at Sotah would be the same as the original 3.
Right.
But now we're saying the 3 is exhaustive, even though with the Sotah we have another example in which we expand the meaning of the verse. But there we don't actually uproot the original intention. We just add more requirements. The original intention, which says shave, still remains shave. Just there's more things to shave. That's all.
You can't use that as an example.
Exactly.
Exhaustion.
That's right. Okay. Now the Gemara gets to something you mentioned. Now, Rav Ashi says, second to last line, Hamas Nisa, that Mishnah, which told us that by the Sotah, you have to shave head, beard, eyebrows, and pubic hair. That is Rabbi Yishmael. That follows the view of Rabbi Yishmael, which we read every single morning before davening. Rabbi Yishmael says, with 13 principles of Torah and the Torah is expounded. And one of the 13 principles is klal, prat, uklal, which is you have a general statement from the Torah, shave him. You have a specific statement from the Torah, his head, his eyebrows, his beard. And then you have a general statement from the Torah, shave him. So what that means is to take the specifics, find a commonality, and make a principle out of it, which we did. We took the specifics, head, eyebrows, beard, found the commonality. It's a cluster of hair, it's exposed, and we made a principle out of that. And we also have the pubic hair because that too is exposed and grows in one particular place. So this is Rabbi Yishmael, the Dorish Klali Prati. This is Rabbi Yishmael who says to extrapolate the generalistic and specific. Now, Rabbi Yishmael's view, says the Gemara, says Rav Ashi, is not to expand that meaning. Keep it exactly like that. In Rabbi Yishmael's view, you would shave only the head, eyebrows, beard, and pubic hair, nothing else. But there's the other Mishnaic text, which said Kedalas. The other Mishnaic text said to shave him like a squash, to shave the entire body. So Mani, who is that? This is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva has a fundamental dispute with Rabbi Yishmael. The Darish Riboy Umiyut. He interprets it to mean, his principle of interpretation is not klal uprat, which is general and specific, but Riboy Umiyut, expansive and restrictive. What's the difference between?
Principle?
It's a disputed principle. So it's not on the list of 13. That's right. That's Rabbi Yishmael's list. Rabbi Akiva has a different list. So that's right. So Rabbi Yishmael says you do general, specific. And then what you do is, when you think about it in general and specific,
What do you mean, Rabbi Akiva says?
Rabbi Yishmael, one second. Rabbi Yishmael says general and specific, klal uprat. And what you do by general and specific is you take the commonality to the specific and you make a principle out of it. You make a general out of it. Okay. But then you have another way of thinking about this is Rabbi Akiva's way, who says, think about it as inclusive versus restrictive. Now, when you have inclusive and restrictive, what you do is as follows. The inclusive includes as much as you possibly can. The restrictive only restricts a tiny extremity. Following? As opposed to taking the specifics and making a principle out of it, like Rabbi Yishmael did. So we took the eyebrows, the head, and the beard, made a principle out of it, anything that's exposed with a cluster of hair, and we included something else, which is the pubic hair. So we took the specifics and made a principle out of it. Rabbi Akiva says, no. When you have a general statement, you got to go as broad as you possibly can. But then when the Torah gives a restrictive, it's not telling you restrict it all the way down to these specifics, but rather find the extreme case and exclude it. So in this case, the Gemara explains how we do it. The Tanya, for we've learned, top of page Tezayin, day 16b. We learned. The verse reads, it'll be on the seventh day, shave his all his hair. Riba, Torah gives us an inclusive statement. Shave his whole body. But then the pasuk says, the pasuk says, his head, his beard, and his eyebrows, miyat. Now the Torah is being restrictive. And then again, that's called Torah says, shave all his hair. Again, the Torah goes back and is expansive. But as opposed to Rabbi Yishmael, who said general, specific, general, and took the specifics and made a principle out of it, here we're going with Rabbi Akiva's way of analysis, which is Riba, the Torah is expansive. Miyat, the Torah is restrictive. The Riba, and again, the Torah is expansive. All the hair, expansive. Head, beard, eyebrows, restrictive. And then all the hair, again, expansive. So says Rabbi Akiva, Riba hakol. When the Torah is expansive, it means everything, all hair. My Riba, what are we including? What are we expanding to? Riba to kula gufe. We're expanding to the entire body. Umay miyat. But then when the Torah is restrictive, what are we going to exclude? We got to find some small extremity and exclude that. as opposed to Rabbi Shmuel, which made a principle out of the specifics and just applied the principle. Rabbi Akiva says the restriction only tells you to find some extreme thing and exclude it. What would that be? Miyat seer, that excludes the hair that's inside the nose. You don't have to shave that.
I was going to say the hair coming out of the ear.
Which means, in Rabbi Akiva's view, shave him like a squash, with the exception of one tiny little bit of hair that's in his nose. Following?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then Rabbi Shmuel, when he gave his list of 3, he was exhaustive. Because in Rabbi Shmuel's view, we do not change the meaning of the literal verse when it comes to the Sotah. We stick to his interpretation, which is to shave only the head, only the beard, only the eyebrows, as stated in the verse, and then also the pubic hair, based on the principle of turning those specifics into a principle. Whereas Rabbi Akiva is of the view, no, shave him like a squash. Why? Because the specifics of the verse is not to make a principle, but rather to exclude a tiny extremity, which is don't shave his nose hair. So either Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva do not change the meaning of the verse when it comes to the Sotah. They just apply different principles. Which means the original list of Rabbi Shmuel of times when the tradition changes the meaning of the verse is exhaustive to only 3. If that's the case, then ashes in replacement of dirt is not on the list and thus cannot be used. Following? Okay, so it's quite the back and forth. So the Gemara says, okay, you went through this whole back and forth. So my Havi Allah, what's the end and conclusion with this question about whether or not you're allowed to use ashes? So even though the Gemara just finished saying that the list of Rabbi Shmuel is exhaustive, but the Gemara doesn't seem so confident about it. Because we have so many different answers as to how to explain why it's not exhaustive, that it seems like the Gemara is still iffy about it. Maybe it is exhaustive. Maybe it's not exhaustive. We're not sure. So what's the end of the deal? Are you allowed to use ashes or not? That's what the Gemara wants to know. Thank you for this whole dissertation on various different ways of interpreting the Sotah. Very nice. Get back to our question. Can we use ashes or not? Yeah? With me, Robert? Where were you at? Tell me where you're at, so I'll fix it up.
These 2 opinions, Akiva and
Rabbi Shmuel. Yeah.
Are they both, they're not expanding the 3?
No.
So we're back to square one.
That's correct. Because both of them are just using their interpretation. Rabbi Akiva uses his interpretations and comes to shaving them like a squash.
Expanding the,
They're both using the literal meaning via the interpretation, the interpretive rules. But they just have different interpretive rules, that's all. So by the Sotah,
in the Torah case, and in either of these opinions, doesn't
we're not uprooting the original meaning. That's correct.
not uprooting the
Or changing it at all. We're just using the principles of interpretation.
right.
But 2 different principles, Rabbi Shmuel's principles or Rabbi Akiva's principles. But either way, we're coming to the literal meaning of the verse, post-interpretation.
So those 3 examples did not use any rules of
That's right. The
interpretation?
original 3 examples did not use any rules of interpretation. They used a tradition from Moses to change the meaning of the verse. That's it.
That's an argument in of itself.
That's correct.
It's not a rabbinic.
It's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
So back to the question.
So back to square one. What's the story with the ashes for the Sotah? Says the Gemara, Tashma, come and listen to the following statement. The Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna taught by Rav Ashi, son of Rav Ashi. Amar Rav, the name of Rav. Ein sham afar. If you don't have earth available, maybe you should bring. So if you don't have any earth available, what do you use for the Sotah? Says Rav, maybe you should bring rakvuvis yerek. You should bring what's the word? Rotten or like powdered vegetables. I think that's the meaning. I'm going to check it up exactly right now. I think that's the translation.
Where are we? 16.
16b. Yeah, decomposed. That's the word they translated as. Yeah. Vegetables that have been decomposed. And umakadish, you sanctify it. How do you sanctify it? So you're trying to use it for the Sotah waters, right? You don't have any earth. So you're taking decomposed vegetables. It's become like powder. You want to use that for the Sotah water. Rav tells us to sanctify it. How would you sanctify it?
Put in a vessel, no? What do you intend?
No, huh? Put it onto the ground of the temple. Right? Put it onto the ground of the temple. That's what Rashi says, yeah. You put it down on the ground level and you put it back into the and you put it into the vessel, into that sanctified vessel, the earthenware vessel, yes. So this, the Gemara is suggesting that if we can expand the meaning of the verse to go from earth to decompose vegetables, then maybe you can use ashes too.
Sure.
Says the Gemara, Velohi. This is not a good comparison. Why? Because Rakavuvis Yerek, decomposed vegetables, who dahava afar, is or does constitute as earth. It becomes earth essentially. Decomposed vegetables become earth. It's compost. That's the whole point, right? That's what we have these fancy compost things for. It's organic. It becomes earth. But afar, ashes, loyava afar, do not become earth. They remain ashes.
It has nothing to offer.
It's right. Ashes has no more nutrition. It's all gone.
It's gone.
So it doesn't, which since you use the word nutrition, just a little light bulb went off in my head. Perhaps it's another message for teshuvah. The whole process here, the Sotah is creating teshuvah, right? So the Gemara is telling you that even if you have a rotten vegetable, the Jew, God forbid, is rotten to the core, but there's still some life left. There's still some nutritional value, and we can use that for teshuvah. Find that small little nutrient and wake it up.
Yeah.
Because no matter what, there's still a little bit left.
Some sparks can
Still some sparks left. And that's why the ashes, that we can't do that because there's nothing left.
It's past.
The body of the Jew, the soul of the Jew always has that little bit of life left. Even if it's a rotten vegetable, you put it into the earth, you can reemerge with new life. Just that bulb went off my head as I used the word nutrient.
Worms to worms.
Yeah. Okay, and so this is the Gemara's conclusion on the discussion of the earth that goes on the water. And God willing, tomorrow we get to the actual water. I'm sorry, we went to the water already, right? We went through the water. The water comes from the wash basin. And we discussed whether the wash basin is new water or collected water. And we went through the vessel. Does it have to be a brand new vessel or just a clean vessel? And can you use a new vessel, an old vessel that's been renewed in a kiln? We discussed that. And now tomorrow we're going to talk about putting the actual earth onto the water, right? Because the Gemara, the Mishnah said that it's got to be seen on the surface. So we're going to discuss that, God willing, tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, Eden.